There's no fans in the room. That one? Oh my God. Yes, Prabhu. Be careful. Hare.
Thank you. Where do you get all that information? I keep meaning to correct it. There's a few details that are wrong. Insignificant. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desha. This Panihati festival, it's actually quite a long story. The essence of it is the cause of unlimited mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, and how they work together. Panihati is a small place on the Ganga down from Mayapur towards Calcutta. But that's not where it starts. It's mainly dealing with Raghunath Das Goswami. He's one of the 6 Goswamis, one of the originals. And his father and his uncle were the richest men in Bengal, and he's the only son in the family. So you know what that's like, right? Especially Indian family. But when he was a young boy, during the Chaturmasya, when the sadhus don't travel, Haridas Thakur stayed in his village, a small village. So he was always talking about Lord Chaitanya. So Raghunath, at a very young age, he wanted nothing but to be with Lord Chaitanya, which was not what his family wanted. They wanted him to take over the business. The big landholders are like kings practically, zamindar. They own all the land and everybody has to pay them taxes. They pay also to the king. But so at young age, he must have probably late teens or something, he started running away from home to try to go and join Lord Chaitanya. But because his father was very influential and could always catch him and bring him back. And he got him married to a beautiful girl, just like an Apsara, but he had no attachment. He had all this money, could have been, inherited everything. He would have inherited everything. He didn't care for it. So it was getting very frustrating for everybody. The mother told the father he should tie him up, The father said, if this beautiful wife won't keep him down, then ropes it. So somehow he went to Shantipur when Lord Chaitanya was there. And Lord Chaitanya told him, just be a good boy, just do your father's business. And just, be a good boy. So I'll take care of everything. So he did that. So for some time, he was doing the business. Even at one point that the father and uncle were cheating the government. And they ran away, and then the government came and they arrested him. To find out, catch the father and uncle. But he charmed the jailkeeper and made some kind of a deal, so the father and uncle gave the jailkeeper some money, and he got out of it. But then, at some point, he went to, here Lord Nityananda was in Panihati. So he went there, and he saw Nityananda sitting on the bank of the Ganga under a tree. In India they build a thing around the tree, and with some of his main associates. Nityananda's, previously he was like Avadhuta, but after he got married, he was a very opulent householder. He was jewels on all his fingers and rings, and, very highly decorated bracelets and necklaces. And there were a lot of other devotees all sitting around. So Raghunath made obeisances from some distance. He was humble. And somebody told Nityananda, there's Raghunath over there. And he said, come here. Why you didn't come? He said, you made an offense. And he bowed down to Lord Nityananda. And Lord Nityananda put both feet on his head, which is something that's not very common. Practically, I know maybe one other incident I've ever heard of. Can't remember who it was. And then he was talking to him a little bit, and he said, so you have to have some punishment. And he was happy about that. He said, you have to make a big feast for everybody. So he was very happy because he had a lot of money. Father had given him so much money. And he didn't, he didn't care. He didn't have any, he didn't care about buying clothes or haircuts and wigs or anything. And cars, there are no cars. He didn't care. No cell phones. Even if they'd been there, he wouldn't care. So he had men with him, and they got like 200 clay pots, and they got some big pots. Then they got this chipped rice, and they got so many pots of yogurt and kheer, just cooked down thick milk. And started mixing up the sweet rice and the flat rice. I don't know if we're having that today, but flat rice, I don't know, then they do something, they smash it, it's flat. Then it soaks up water or liquid very fast. It's convenient health food. Kavichandra Swami used to really love that stuff. And Parikram, once they found a flat rice factory, and he got really excited. Big bag. That it's a good health food, you can just mix water anywhere. You don't have to cook it. So they were mixing up fruit and whatever other things in it. And they started serving it. And of course it's India, So even there's no cell phones and there's no internet, no fax, no any kind of phone. Somehow everybody for many miles around finds out. And they just come. So more and more devotees were coming, they had to go, he had to send his people to the next village to buy stuff. And they were sitting even in the river, in the Ganga, because there was no space. It's a very small place, I've been there. And so it was very, very blissful. And Lord Chaitanya came, but in a spiritual form. So only a few devotees could see him. And he was going around with Nityananda like this, and they were serving prasad. But they would just see this prasad come and drop on their plate, and they couldn't see the hand. And sometimes Nityananda would be feeding him, and he'd just be putting something over here, and it would disappear. So it was a really amazing festival. It went on for a long time. Then after that, Raghunath, he was really happy to be able to do that. And he left a lot of gold. He left gold for all of Nityananda, a lot of gold for Lord Nityananda, and then gold for all his associates. Pretty, lot. So he went home and went back to being a good boy. And the family priest came. He said that one of the pujaris had booked. He'd given up his service, and he wanted Raghunath to come with him to convince him to come back. Raghunath was extremely charming, and nobody could resist. So he agreed, and they traveled wherever they went, and nobody paid any attention. Normally, 6 guards were following him wherever he went to make sure he couldn't get away. But they thought he's going with the priest, so it's okay. So after they convinced this pujari to take up his service again, it was dark. And he told the priest, I can go back. I'll by myself, don't worry. So the priest agreed, and he took off. This is an arrangement of Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya. First, Lord Chaitanya arranged that he would meet Lord Nityananda. So he walked to Jagannath Puri. But he didn't take the main road because he knew his father would be looking for him. So his father, in the morning, they realized he was gone. So they sent the people, and they caught up to the party of the devotees. All the devotees from Mayapur, they were going to Puri. And they were looking, but they had not seen Raghunath. And they were moving much faster. He was going in the back through the villages and a long way around. And traveled, constantly walking, not even eating sometimes, hardly eating at the whole trip. 12 days anyway, normally, but he took longer, so the other devotees got there first. Then Raghunath got there, and Lord Chaitanya was very, very happy to see him. He greeted him and welcomed him, because he had arranged it. And then he put him under the care of Srup Damodar, his personal secretary. So then Raghunath became also one of the most intimate associates, because he was always there whenever Lord Chaitanya was in Puri. Raghunath was right there witnessing everything. And the two of them would take notes of all Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, and that's where a lot of books come from, those notes. Then the father finally heard about it. So he knew he's not going to get him back. He heard he was begging. So the father sent men and money to take care of him, to cook for him and do everything. So he was inviting devotees all the time to his house, a big feast, inviting Lord Chaitanya. But then he thought, this is really contaminating to take money from materialistic people. Even though the father and the uncle they weren't like pure devotees, but they were basically supporting the entire Brahminical and Vaishnava community in their whole area. They were very charitable and very nice, but they weren't pure devotees, and they were considered materialists. So he stopped taking the money. And then Lord Chaitanya came to Swarup Damodar and he said, what happened? Raghunath used to invite me for prasad, and now he's not inviting me. He said, well, he got tired of taking money from his father, so he would just stand outside the temple, and when the pujaris and puri, they all come out with a big pot of prasad, depending on their position, some of them really big pots. And then he would just beg. And then after a while he thought, this is no good. Like a prostitute, you know, this one gave me something yesterday, maybe this one will give me something today, and you know, maybe this one has the good stuff, because there's 64 different preparations. So he stopped doing that, and he just went for Food for Life. They had the free food booth, you know, and beggars all come and get a little bit. And Lord Chaitanya heard about that, he said, very good. Then he thought, that's too much. So then Lord Chaitanya asked again, what is Raghunath eating now? He said, where he goes, where they wash the pots and from the kitchen, and there's rice comes, you know, things come out, and it's kind of rotten, even cows don't eat it. And he's picking up this rice and washing it off and eating that. And Lord Chaitanya said, well, that's really good. And he went and he said, Raghunath, there's a really nice picture. What are you eating? He was trying to hide it. He didn't want Lord Chaitanya to touch it. Lord Chaitanya grabbed it. Said, you're eating so nice that you never gave me any. It's not nice. And he just ate it. Raghunath was really in anxiety. But Lord Chaitanya said, this is the best prasad I ever had. So he instructed Raghunath. Never dress nicely and never eat nicely. You know, like Sanatana and Rupa, he told him, you find all these places of Krishna's Leela and write books. Raghunath, he just told him he'd be the most renounced. So he lived like that until Lord Chaitanya left. Raghunath, he was so distressed without Lord Chaitanya's association. I mean, he was quite young when he went in the first place, and he'd just been with Lord Chaitanya. He couldn't stand it, so he said he's going to go to Vrindavan and suicide, and jump off Govardhan Hill. And, you know, it would be not so easy to do. Govardhan Hill's not so tall. You know. So he went to Vrindavan, and he met Rupa and Sanatana, and he knew them because they used to come to Puri, stay there quite long stretches. And they told him, this is not good, suicide. Lord Chaitanya doesn't like suicide. If anybody's thinking of suicide, Lord Chaitanya doesn't like. Sanatana Goswami was thinking of suicide at one time. When he traveled from Vrindavan, he went through the forest and he got bad water. He had like boils all over his body, pus and blood coming out and stink. And Lord Chaitanya would always embrace him, and it would get on his body. And Sanatana just thought, it's too bad. I can't. This is too much. You know? So he thought he would jump under the wheel of the Jagannath cart, which would be pretty effective suicide, because the Jagannath cart has 18 wheels, and they're wood, the whole thing is wood, and it must weigh tons. So one day Lord Chaitanya came to where he was staying with Rupa Goswami at the time, and he just started talking how suicide is bad. So then Raghunath or Sanatana understood that he knows my mind. Lord Chaitanya said, if suicide would get me back to Godhead, I would have killed myself many times already. One time in Fiji, I was there in 1979 or something, and we had one young girl that Upananda Prabhu had been preaching to, but her parents were totally, she was Indian, but her parents were totally against it. So one day she jumped off the bridge and she left a note, I can't stay in the material world anymore, I want to go back to God. So people were very impressed, they thought she was a great devotee. But her parents said that the Hare Krishnas pushed her off the bridge. So we got, and then they wrote in the newspaper. So I went to the newspaper and said, you have to let us also say something. But I said that, I said, we don't suicide, and I said, if it worked, I would have killed myself many times. It would get me back to Krishna. And they put that in the newspaper and everybody liked it. So then Raghunath just lived a totally renounced life in Garadakund. He would chant 200,000. This is a picture. Lord Chaitanya getting his price. Lord Chaitanya is telling us, eat nice prasad and distribute nice prasad and dress nice for preaching. Otherwise, what's the use of dressing nice? He wasn't preaching exactly. He was preaching by his example. But not only did he do the 200,000 names, it's 128 rounds minimum. He would pay obeisances to 2,000 Vaishnavas. He lived at Radhakund, and there was one devotee, Bhakta, somebody who went to live at Radhakund, and devotees were impressed, Prabhupada was not impressed by him. And they said he's doing a parikama every day, or maybe Radhakund parikama, I don't know. Prabhupada said, is he doing Dandavat? They said, no. He said, that's what Raghunath did. So every time he'd pay obeisance to different devotees. Prabhupada laughed, he said, so it's good exercise. It is, I did it at Radhakund a couple times. It's quite, it's really wonderful, because you pay obeisances and you look up and it's a pig or a dog or you get a lot of realizations. So he lived like that, and if he met any other devotee, he would also embrace them and greet them. He was digging a well because he didn't want to use the Radhakund water for his bath. They were drilling, or whatever they do to dig the well, I guess hammering, and the blood came out of one stone. And then he had a dream, and Govardhan said, you hit my tongue. So he took that stone, there's a little temple, Jiva Mandir, Jiva, tongue on there. Pretty big stones. So he lived there like that for many, many years. He would eat, not really eat, but chops. Jas is, the Indians know it. It's thinner than water, you know, it's like really light, and he would eat like every other day or something. So he was not physically very strong, but he was just always chanting. He wrote a few small books also about Lord Chaitanya. So that, you know, he was a special product of the mercy of Lord Nityananda with Panihati festival. That's why we try to observe it. At Panihati, the devotees, I don't know this year, but normally they go there and they serve this really sweet flat rice. Hundreds of thousands of people, huge amount of people celebrate this festival. Jagataka Maharaj in Miami, or Atlanta temple is called New Panihati, and they have a very big Panihati festival usually. And he started this thing, they get these pots and they make up all kinds of different mixtures of fruits and vegetables, all kinds of different things, and auction them off. And the devotees donate, you know, some big ones, all different sizes, different amounts. And that way they help finance the temple. But there's so much flat rice that nobody can eat all of it. But I don't know if anybody made it. I saw too many things there, so flat rice. Big event. First time I went to Mayapur, I had it every day for breakfast. He said it was Lord Nityananda's favorite food. I don't know if he asked, you know, Raghunath, you have to make the flat rice, or he said you just have to make a feast for everybody. So that's what he did, because that's quick. Now that, you know, he didn't have the kitchen and but it's a beautiful place right on the bank of the Ganga. And I think not too far after Shantipur. And it's also the home of Raghava Pandit. And we know Raghava Pandit, Panihati. He's famous for cooking, him and his sister. They would cook hundreds of things for Lord Chaitanya. They would cook sweets and condiments, pickles, things that would keep. And they would wrap each thing up in a bag. The recipes are in the Chaitanya chart, not the recipes, the name of all these things. And Prabhupada says that, you know, we should learn these things. At Raghava's house, they have a glass case and they have a wax display of all these preparations. Not all, but many. And then they would carry them all to Jagannath Puri, and then Lord Chaitanya would take. They were so good that he would eat just a little bit every day. He wouldn't just eat it all, with a lot, of course. So Lord Nityananda had a big festival there after this Raghunath festival. He went to Raghava's house. And they had the kirtan. 72 hours of kirtan. Nobody slept. Even the children. Everybody chanted and danced for 72 hours. And Lord Chaitanya came in that one. Again, nobody could see him. Because Nityananda is dancing, and that's one of the places Lord Chaitanya always comes, is wherever Lord Nityananda is dancing. And he was sitting in a tree or something, and everybody could smell this garland of some kind of flower from South India. It's not like a Bengal. Nobody knew where they couldn't see it either. They didn't know where it's coming from. Nityananda said, I want a Kadamba flower garland. And they said, it's not Kadamba flower season, my dear Lord. It's a very short season. And besides that, we don't even have a tree around here. He said, no, you go look in the front. So there's a big lemon tree in the yard at Raghava Pandit, and it was full of Kadamba flowers. So Nityananda got his karma. So these are the mystical things that, prasad and kirtan, that's the custom. You didn't hear about any lectures or anything. First was prasad in this case. Nityananda may have been lecturing when Radhanath got there. Because they were just sitting around and they would only, obviously, they never talked about anything except Krishna or Lord Chaitanya. But that's our life, this is our constant festival, that's Vaikuntha, and it's Goloka. Every water is all nectar, the cows have unlimited milk, oceans of milk. The trees are all desire trees, that means any fruit or vegetable or jewel or anything you want, the tree can give you. Because when you only want things for Krishna, and then everything gets invited, gets just a few. If you want for your own sense gratification, then no matter how hard you try to manifest opulence like in advertisements, you won't get it unless it's your karma. But if you're trying to get spiritual advancement, that doesn't depend on your karma, it just depends on your desire. So we're trying to change our desires. We all have so many desires. And Prahlad and all the great devotees pray to clear the heart of these desires for sense gratification, which are just like demons. We don't have to live like Radhanath, it would be nice. There probably are some devotees Prabhupada's created to live like that. But he was, of course, loved by everybody, like all the Goswamis. Just chanting and bowing down to devotees and embracing every devotee who comes. One time, and he was a great devotee of Radha and Krishna, of Radharani. And somebody was worried that he should eat more, so he found some bigger leaf plates. So he got a really big leaf plate and he brought it and had more chops. And he said, "Where did you get this plate?" He told him in the village that's a Chandala being with Krishna. So he finally left his body. And there's a tomb there of the teen Goswamis, Raghunath Das Goswami, and Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, and Krishna Das Kaviraj. One day on the disappearance day of Raghunath Das, Raghunath Bhatta was so intensely feeling separation, he left his body. He was much younger, so much later. And then later the same thing, Krishna Das Kaviraj. Because Raghunath, when he was in Radhakund, another thing he did every day was 3 hours talking about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes and teachings. So Krishna Das Kaviraj lived right next to him. So he took notes. He listened to him every day. So that's how that we have Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because no one else knew all that anymore. Only Krishna Das Kaviraj alive who had heard all this. And so all the people begged him to write. So based on what he heard, and Raghunath also had Srila Damodar's notes. And they were very thorough, like when Lord Chaitanya traveled, when he got back, they would interrogate the servant, to get everything. What did he do in South India? What did he do in Vrindavan? And they would get every detail like that. And they would absorb. So that therefore we have Chaitanya Charitamrita. I hope everybody has a full set in their house. And you have an extra one for guests to come and like. It's the most important book. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, before Chaitanya Charitamrita, many people read Srimad Bhagavatam, but you cannot understand Srimad Bhagavatam until you read Chaitanya Charitamrita. Some devotees think, because Prabhupada said it's postgraduate, that you can't read it until you read the entire Bhagavatam. But if you look at Prabhupada's lectures from 1968 in New York City, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it was Sanatana's teachings, very advanced. Mayapur, 74, 75, 76, morning class was all Chaitanya Charitamrita, even before it came out. So Prabhupada definitely wanted us. I was on the walk when it first came out in Vrindavan, and somebody said, Prabhupada, can we distribute this to the public? He said, yeah. He said, it's just like a bowl of candy. You take from this side, that side, top of it, a little sweet. Whatever book they like, let them read it. So we should all read Chaitanya Charitamrita very carefully and understand that it's a continuation of Chaitanya Leela. It's not just, this is some, invented movement like some people think. I mean, some even thought Prabhupada, they thought that Lord Chaitanya had invented some new religion. It's not Hinduism. Some of Prabhupada's godbrothers think also, what's he doing? Going and initiating all these yavanas and milechas. But he was following Lord Chaitanya. He did Lord Chaitanya also did. So Lord Nityananda's mercy has no limit. Tamal Krishna Maharaj really, for there was one devotee and he left the association and he was doing really nonsense, crazy things. And Prabhupada was not getting mad. And he said, is there any limit to Lord Nityananda's mercy? He said, no, absolutely no limit. So fortunately for me, and maybe some of you also who didn't come from absolutely pure backgrounds, we're very fortunate that Lord Nityananda is so merciful. He looks for the most flawed. Because just like Jagai and Madai, Nityananda thought, if I make them devotees, he said, I'm not bragging, but he said at that time there were 2 Jagai and Madai. And now everybody's Jagai. All of my disciples are Jagai and Madai. But by the mercy of the holy name, so therefore devotees understanding that, they go out and they chant the holy name and they broadcast it as widely as possible. Go out in the public, meet the people, purify the whole atmosphere, the polluted atmosphere of Kali Yuga with all the hellish nonsense sounds that are going on, and put it on the internet, put it everywhere. Purify the ether, purify the cyberspace, purify your own face. So, this Panihati is a very good example of Nityananda's causeless mercy. And just by that effort for Raghunath, it was not a big deal to give a feast for thousands of devotees and give gold and just pocket money, you know. But he got released from, you know, his family life just by that. When Chaitanya arranged it, he took permission. He could go to Panihati and see what Nityananda. The bodyguards are with him. They didn't seem like anything wrong, right? No problem. He's just distributing food. That was good. But he was actually released from the bondage. Next thing you know, this incident with the priest came, and he just walked away. Nobody suspected him. So that's the basic history of the Panihati festival. We should really, you know, of course there's so much more mercy of Lord Nityananda. Our whole movement is the mercy of Lord Nityananda. And he brought the Mahamantra, Gurukara Premadana, Harinam Sankirtan. Lord Nityananda brought it. So, you know, he was going out, chanting in the streets. They went every day. Udilo Arana, when the sun was rising, they went out. Can't do that now in the city, it'd be disturbing the peace. In the village, everybody's already up anyway. Farmers. He went door to door on the order of Lord Chaitanya. And he said, just chant Hare Krishna. Bolo Krishna, Bhaja Krishna, Kodo Krishna, Shiksha. Chant Krishna, worship Krishna, and learn from Krishna. Take instruction. Begging people. Some people chased him away. Not only Jagai Mata, many people get out here. You Vaishnava and beggars. He said, I don't ask anything. Only just say Hare Krishna. You know, like Mahavishnu Swami. So, you know, it's not very difficult. And most people very much like saying. By the time they finish the mantra, they become very happy. They don't know what it is. You don't have to know. But we know. And we know that they got started in that's cutting. So that's enough. He said there'd be questions or comments. So, anybody have any comments? Yes.
Maharaj, in one of the example where I think Chota Haridas or Bada Haridas, he did committed some offense and then he committed suicide, and Mahaprabhu said that he did it right. So like you were saying that when Mahaprabhu didn't recommend it suicide, but in that particular case, since he did offense, Mahaprabhu said it is correct. But what I wanted to ask is, how can we avoid such offenses in our mind?
Well, in the junior Haridas, that's some kind of very inconceivable special deal. And it was just arranged by Lord Chaitanya to show an example for the sannyasis. That they should be very, very careful. So he didn't really make of him. But, you know, he was looking lustily at this woman. And then he chastised him. So after a while he was gone, and he said he'd done that. And in that case he said, good, no. But then the devotees would hear, he was a famous singer, and they would hear him singing, you know, around Lord Chaitanya. So he was there in the spiritual body, associating with Lord, always chanting for Lord Chaitanya. in the case of one of my godbrothers, he asked Prabhupada, he was a sannyasi, and he asked Prabhupada about that, and he said, is that the right thing to do? And Prabhupada said yes, but then that devotee went a little far back, and Prabhupada said, but I don't do that. Lord Chaitanya could do that for me. We don't have to, we can't think like that. How can we avoid offenses? Is to practice non-offensive chanting. Just keep chanting. Chanting publicly means you're worshiping Lord Chaitanya. Any kind of preaching is worshiping Lord Chaitanya. And by Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda, they don't take offense. That's why we chant. What do we chant before we chant Hare Krishna? One time, two more.
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
So you're the Bhakta Vrinda, the Gaur Bhakta Vrinda, the devotees of Lord Chaitanya. So that, you see how they become very close. And so it's highly recommended, practically ordered by Prabhupada. It's in, I think, chapter 7 of the Adi Lila. Before we chant Hare Krishna, we must say this mantra. The more we say it, the better. Because it frees us from offense, so then we can actually chant the Maha Mantra. So Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya, they don't take offense so easy. Mayapur's Adorya Dham, come in. Vrindavan is, you have to be more pure and more strict about everything. But by mercy of Lord Chaitanya, we can enter into that. Glorify devotees, then you want to offend devotees. Distribute books, tell people these are great books, you won't offend the scriptures. Not so complicated. Keep chanting. When I was very new amongst devotees, I went to San Francisco, and there was one Mataji, she's one of the early devotees in San Francisco. And I read about later in the Leelamrita. She was a little proud, she was educated. And she told me, and I was a brand new devotee, she said, I was always making a lot of offenses when I was chanting, so I stopped chanting. And she said, do you think that's good? Somehow, that's not right, I didn't really know anything, but I could understand that's not right. It changed. So just keep chanting. Come to New York and go out with Ram Rai. Huh?
You could stay in Columbus still. You could stay here.
Yeah, you can stay here and go out to the campus. But if you need a boost, you can join. Okay, anyone else?
Maharaj,
Yeah.
you recommended the nectar of instruction to follow in the footsteps of the advanced devotees.
Charya.
Yes. How do we go about following Kavichandra Swami footsteps?
Well, he obeyed the order of Lord Chaitanya. So you obeyed whatever order you're getting from your guru. But he just chanted and glorified devotees. You can do that. Maybe you can't do the same eating habits and sleeping. They'd sleep maybe 1 hour, hour and a half out of 24 hours. But they weren't thinking like, today I will fast, I will not sleep. They forget to sleep. It's like many of the devotees did last night. Right? They went over to Prabhupada's palace and just chanted all night. And forgot to sleep. Even I did it, and I haven't slept yet. So much chanting over the weekend. So definitely has a powerful effect. So just do whatever you can to keep chanting. But Raghunath, mostly what he did was just chant and greet devotees, praise devotees. You know, there's many pastimes with him. He was just doing his bhajan out in the hot sun, and Sanatan said, no, you gotta make a kuchi. And then one day Sanatan saw, because he wasn't inclined, and he saw Radharani holding her shawl and blocking the sun. He told him, and then he made a kuchi. And he was lamenting, how can I do that? Because he wasn't getting the money from his father anymore. He didn't have anything. He was completely renounced. So he was thinking, how can I do this? I can't follow the order of my guru. But he wanted to. And one very rich man, he was going to Badarik Ashram. He went there and he was going to donate a really big amount to the deity there. And in the dream, the deity said, no, don't give it to me. Go to Vrindavan and give it to Raghunath. So he came and he gave Raghunath this big money. So Raghunath said, okay. And he actually had that man do the work. But they had the design, and then now we have the, all the ghat and everything all around Radhakunda and Shyamakunda, and made it really nice. Made it much bigger. Because when Lord Chaitanya found Radhakunda, it was puzzled. So, just by desiring it came about. He didn't go out and get a job or think, well, I'll go back and ask my father. I don't know what happened to the father's money after somebody.
I'd like to thank you for the Panihati Cida Dadhi Festival lecture. The devotees will start setting up for Prashadam, and Ramraj will be kirtan.
Yeah, that's the best thing. Kirtan is what it's all about. This is the Sankirtan movement, not the Kirtan. Prabhupada would correct. Sankirtan. Sang means many, everybody. Everybody chanting. Many devotees together, and everybody chanting, and listening. Chanting. Sankirtan. Hare Krishna. Strongly that if anybody makes t-shirts, don't just put kirtan in. Because if you wear that public, who knows what that is? And especially now there's so many kirtan. Oh. There's one guy I heard about in Bali, and I saw they started advertising chocolate kirtan. And they get this cacao, and it's a ceremony. They make this really thick cacao drink, and then they dance madly, but they don't chant Hare Krishna very much. They chant so many things. So many different kinds of, they call kirtan. We're going to say Krishna kirtan, Hare Krishna kirtan. Put Hare Krishna big, Hare Krishna kirtan. And that's what we'll do now, right? Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Got things really off the ground. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Gauranga.
Gauranga.
Panihati Swami ki
Jai.
Nityananda Prabhu ki
Jai.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki
Jai.
Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki
Jai.
Panihati Dham ki
Jai.
So is Kavichandra Swami Maharaja ki
Jai.